We're in Brussels at the moment. We're at the Gigabit Access Conference for 2017. Had a keynote here this morning. So the title of the NetComm keynote is around real broadband, delivering broadband as a service. So it's really about how do we as a community come up with a solution for those hard to reach places, the underserved, the people in the metropolitan areas that aren't currently connected, or the people in the rural community that don't have a service today. And how can we design a solution together to really have a new service through to those people in that part of the community.
Steve Collins, who is the CTO of NetComm Wireless, who is going to be talking about fixed wireless, and the title of his presentation is Broadband Delivered as Promised. So, thank you, Steve.
Okay, thank you very much. My name's Steve Collins from NetComm Wireless. Now, many of you probably aren't aware of NetComm Wireless and what we do. NetComm are from Sydney in Australia. So I've got a 20-minute little speaking slot here to talk to you. I've travelled 28 hours to get here and I'm talking for 20 minutes. So that's kind of a bit of fun. But it's actually, from our perspective, absolutely worth it. We've been doing some very innovative projects in Australia and the USA. A lot around fixed wireless, a lot around fibre to distribution point, which is using VDSL and G-Fast technology. But we do all the engineering for our products in-house. We have all the hardware, mechanical, software engineering in-house. And we do that deliberately because what we do is the non-standard product. Standard modems, standard termination devices are available from many vendors. There's big companies that do that really, really well. And so we've made a strategic decision not to try and tackle that market. We use the same building blocks, the same technology as everyone else. Everyone's got the same market they're drawing from chipsets and the like. G-Fast is coming, it's available to everyone. What NetComm does is take that technology and put it in products that are a little bit unique. So we've been in business for over 30 years. And our first products were serial modems, 4800 baud, 9600 baud, good fun. And it's interesting, a lot of the language that I've been hearing over the last 2 days with the speeds, the gigabit speeds, it's the same thing. It's been going for 30 years. We've been talking about the next speed and the next speed that's coming as solving all these problems. But does it? It's kind of this hamster wheel that we're on. And the fine print's there on every time we do a release. 4800 baud, little print, up to 4800 baud, up to a gigabit. And it's this up to speed that NetComm tends to operate, because where do we play? Well, end users are telling us that they don't really want a gigabit. These are the underserved end users, the end users that don't have a service today. They might be on dial-up or ADSL1. They don't care about a gigabit. They just want something that works. And we're talking about triple play broadband here, voice, video, data. They want something that when they go to use it, it just works. And it's interesting how the language has changed in the last few years. Everyone used to want internet. It was not a luxury, but it was a thing that was good fun. You used it, and then you got off. But nowadays, with the amount of connectivity that we've all got, the language that the users are using for what they want has changed. They believe broadband's an entitlement. They just want it to always be there. When they go to use it, it's there. And it's a real change of language and thought pattern that we're seeing. And what does that mean? This is not my idea, what you see behind you. This is pretty common. It's the idea of broadband becoming the next service to the household or the premise or the business. You've got water, sewage, gas, electricity. These are things that just work. You turn the tap on, water comes out. Users want to turn their modem on and they want internet to come out just when they want it. They don't want to think about, oh, there's 3 people using the tap at the moment, therefore I can't have a drink of water, right? Same with sewage. Oh, you can't flush the toilet at the moment, it's 7 p.m. at night, that's peak period, right? It doesn't work. Broadband's becoming this next layer that governments are being drawn into to provide to their constituents, their citizens of their country. And we heard from the European Commission yesterday morning, and it was interesting to hear his language around moving away from the gigabit as being the target to what is the minimum viable product, what is the minimum level that we need to deliver to people in the EU, especially in the underserved people, the underserved community. And we talked about rural just a second ago, but it's not just rural. There's also elements of metropolitan areas where the big rollout just doesn't cover it. There's a crushed duct, or the pit's full and they can't get the cable in. So there's a house here and a house here, and you miss out. Unlucky. So governments are getting involved. It's not just EU, and I'm going to bring a little bit of perspective to you just for what's happening in Australia and the US that we've been involved with, just to kind of give you a bit of a flavour for it. But this isn't the first time that governments got involved in regulating these services you see behind me. I like this slide. Very proud of it. I got to put death on a screen at a technology conference. So this is a picture from 1858. It's from a cartoon called Punch Magazine in London. It depicts death rowing down the River Thames, and floating in the river is some dead animals and basically sewage. This was a tough time. This was cholera, and this was not a very nice place to be. Following this year, the government put in place regulation to put in the London sewage system, which is widely regarded as one of the 7 industrial wonders of the world. And it works, and all cities around the world now do this, and these services are now available and are taken for granted as things that are there. Now, this is happening to broadband today. In Australia, the regulator is called the ACCC, Australian Competition Consumer Commission, and they, in February, released a paper, and the message of it's very, very clear. You, as an internet service provider, forget talking about your peak speed. It's not relevant. Talk about what are the speeds, on average, the consumer will get during busy periods. That's quite a change. It goes against everything we've just spoken about in the last day around, oh, let's get to a gigabit, up to a gigabit. In Australia, it's different. We've got a different environment there. We have a wholesale operator called NBN who provides wholesale services. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's changed. Talk about how applications will work. Forget about your peak speed. Talk about how things like Netflix and voice over IP, talk about how they will work. Disclose all service information to your customers. So if it's a wireless service, what could get in the way and what effect will that have on your end speed? And very strong systems around diagnosing and resolving issues. These are guidelines. In the US, it's similar. It's called a different thing. It's called Broadband Facts, and it's not quite as strong yet, but it's almost there, and it's around providing typical speeds, upstream, downstream, latency, jitter, and the like. It's not peak anymore. You must disclose what you get. And in Europe, this slide's a little bit old now after hearing the conversation yesterday, but in Europe it's going in the same direction, particularly for the underserved parts of the footprint, rural and the other sort of properties I spoke about before. So, what am I saying here? What am I saying is missing from the system? It's not like things are broken, but I'm saying that talking about the full speed, the peak speed, is becoming less important in this environment of possibly increased regulation and the like. So what you promise is what you must deliver. It's very harsh, isn't it? It's not so unfair, actually. And the reason we can't always, as an ecosystem, we can't always estimate what the speeds will be is because there's so many unknown parts of the network. There's the copper pair that runs from the exchange to the house, and it goes through pits, and it's underwater, and it's tough. We just heard a great discussion before me which talked about all the unknowns in planning the wireless network. It's all absolutely correct. Because there's an unknown part of the network, you can't now work out what your minimum speeds are going to be. It's tough. So getting on top of that's a really key item. CPEs have become a commodity. We heard from 3 operators just a second ago. I'm a CPE designer, and I kind of sit on the other side of the fence, and we talk about, oh, we've got to get the cost out of the products. We've got to get it down. Well, let me tell you, the cost is way out already. Things have been integrated and integrated. We're down to one piece of silicon in the CPE that does everything. It's to the point now when you want your CPE to run a throughput test itself, I want the CPE to do an uplink downlink test. The act of running the test impacts the protocol engine on the CPU. So the test is incorrect. That's how integrated everything is. There's no fat in there to do anything smart. That's a bit of a problem when you're talking about these minimum performance levels. A lot of people have spoken about systems being available off the shelf. They want to take advantage of a big purchasing power and one product to fit everywhere. But we just heard before, one solution doesn't cut it, especially in these hard-to-reach areas. That's kind of where NetComm fits in. So, quick break, because I feel like I've been up here kind of whinging about things and telling you how to do it, and that's not the case. What I was trying to say is regulators are getting involved. We're seeing it. We've been, in the last 5 years, really involved in a really heavy compliance arrangement in Australia, and because of our success doing that, we've been taken over to the US by a big carrier there doing a similar product. And it's more around that underserved part of the footprint. So what I'm trying to say is, I think this is coming. And I know the cost model doesn't always add up, but sometimes some things can change. In Australia, the rural parts of the community is subsidised by the metro. It's a government policy. Now, that's not happening here, I get that, but things change, and the language from regulators is changing. In the US, the rural part of the community was subsidised by CAF2, Connect America Fund 2. It's not subsidised by the metro area, but it's the same principle, and it's kind of happening. So let me now tell you a little bit about the sort of things that NetComm's been doing, a little bit about our products and the use cases. What we don't do at NetComm is try and sell off-the-shelf products. What we do is have these building blocks of technology around G.fast and LTE 4.5G, and we talk to our customers, operators, and say, well, what's your problem? What are you trying to solve? And some of the discussion that happened just in the previous conversation there on the panel, I would have loved to have a chat with some of those operators and just talk about how we can take their unique physical environment, the villas here, what could we do with some technology to build a hybrid approach? This is the multi-technology mix that has been spoken about several times today. Okay. This slide has a number of acronyms, therefore it's very technical. This is a 4G network, high level, super high level, just to kind of illustrate a principle. In the blue square is what I've called the trusted zone. This is the part of the network that is managed and controlled by network infrastructure vendors and operators, and it's done very well. It's sophisticated, it's intelligent, it scales, and it's managed from a central operations core. On your left is an acronym UE. UE stands for user equipment. That's code for not our problem. UE can be anywhere. It can be in your pocket, it can be in your handbag. It's very hard to manage a performance level through to something like that, so it is quite deliberately excluded from the managed trusted zone. It does its thing. Let's turn that on its head a bit, though, for this use case of broadband to the premise. So we have a product that we call a WNTD, wireless network terminating device, and the language is important. Instead of it being a CPE, which just a customer takes home and self-installs, and it'll do what it does. It'll do up to a gigabit. Forget that. This is my network termination point. This is where me as an operator, this is where my responsibility stops. I'm going to manage that connection all the way through to the device. Yes, it's professionally installed. Yes, that has a cost. But once you've made that commitment, you can install that and you can do testing and you can do commissioning and you can know that when you leave site as an installer, you have a link rate that is known. You know that that device is connecting with my base station. It is modulating at X. Therefore, I now have a minimum performance guarantee, at least for the link rate portion. Everything upstream from that, somebody else's problem. So, wireless is an assured service, we call this. What's the difference? So we have the movement of this demarcation point from cell tower through to side of house. We now know that that device is performing at a certain level, so now we can plan the RF link budget. This is something that network planners do all the time, but they normally do it in terms of base station through to handsets, and those handsets, there's models around how they're going to perform. Well, now we have a different model, which is a device on the side of a house with a known performance, known gain, and you can plan that link budget very accurately. Once you know the link budget, you can then know what the modulation will be. Will it be 256 QAM down, 64 QAM up? Now you know a speed, at least for the link. And lastly, the network-grade diagnostics. Extremely important to have this device as part of your network operations center. Not part of some separate CPE-managed cloud. It's part of your network. It's your network termination device. Manage it like that. Here's a picture. This is the NBN system. NBN got mentioned in that last discussion as, and it is referenced quite often as the leading fixed wireless solution in the world today. And the reason it is actually because of the unspectacular speed that you see there. 100 meg down, 40 up. We're at a Gigabit conference. That's not up to, that's from. That or above. That's what you'll get, because we know it's a managed installation, the link budget's known, and we can then say, you will get this speed. Yes, there's contention, but we know the link rate, we know the modulation speed, and we can do something interesting with that. So this concept of moving the network zone, the trusted zone, and moving the demarcation point out closer to the home applies to all technologies. I just showed you a sample for 4.5G. It can work on fiber, it can work on copper, G.fast, and it can work on HFC, DOCSIS 3.1. NetComm has these building blocks that we use to then compile a product together to solve those problems. I'm just going to quickly touch on fiber to the DP. We're doing a fiber to the DP product. This is rolling out at the moment. The one that's in the field now, being installed this year, is a VSL2 solution. The customer is doing that because they need a solution today. It's going to go to G.fast, absolutely. What NetComm's done that's a bit different to some of the other products on the market is we've really focused on the use case for this customer. It's an underground. They also do some deployment. This is what it looks like. There's these pits. They're actually very small, and when it rains, they can fill up with water, and they can be underwater for months. So it's a harsh environment. It needs to survive that. The thermal effects are pretty harsh in there. It gets very hot, and there's some really challenging lightning scenarios around the fact that it's connected to the copper network, and surge voltages have to be dissipated. Interestingly, earthing the device is not an option for us because many of these pits are made from asbestos. Can't put an earth through asbestos. So there were some interesting engineering challenges around that. That's exactly what NetComm's about. No technology conference is complete without a slide on 5G. I've put everything that is locked in about 5G on this slide for you to read. Okay, fixed wireless is one of our core games. We are absolutely in this fixed wireless sector. 5G will be a use case. My view is that it's not going to be the technology killer app, if you like, that's going to come in and replace. I agree completely with the comments from the panel just before me. 5G will be very targeted. 5G will be used for certain niche applications. Kind of like narrowband IoT is coming. You've got this one technology that goes off in all these hundreds of directions. There's no one product to rule them all. My view is 5G will do the same sort of thing. Right, let me finish up. So what am I saying to you today? I'm saying that it is possible to differentiate your broadband offering to the market. I know that it's hard to do these underserved parts of the community. I know it's hard to do rural, and I know that it's cost challenged. That's why it's not being done. But the regulation environment is changing. And if you agree with my idea around the utility nature of these broadband services, if that's the way broadband's becoming, then that language of what is the minimum viable product, what is the minimum performance for your product, is going to come into effect. So how do we as an ecosystem solve that? Well, we think of the broadband service, we think of network-grade diagnostics, think of the devices that are at the customer's site. Instead of being CPE, think of them as network termination devices, where your network stops, where your service to your customer starts, and how do you pull that into your network core. Think about the total cost of ownership of installing the product. Don't think about the product cost itself. Think of how you install it. The example of 100 villas, well, let's look at how the villas were constructed and see if there's something we can do from an installation perspective that makes it cheaper to install. Lastly, the purpose-built solutions. These hard parts of the network are not going to be addressed using off-the-shelf solutions. They're not. And that's why it isn't being done. So we've got to think more creatively. We have to work more in partnership to talk about the problems and the solutions that can be brought to bear to bring connectivity to these parts of the market. So thank you very much for your time. I'll be on the table if anyone wants to have a question or a chat later on. Thank you.